Welcome you to our June regular meeting of the Board of Education for Lake Mills Area School District. Our mission statement for the Lake Mills Area School District is preparing all students, today's students for tomorrow's opportunities. And can I ask, has the meeting been properly posted?
Yes, it was posted on the LMASD website and at the Lake Mills Post Office and submitted to the Lake Mills Leader.
Okay, thank you. I will call the meeting to order then, and I will invite you to stand if you're able and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will request a roll call for attendance, please.
Brianna Beslick,
Here?
Ken Eimers,
Here.
Andrea Graham, Kirk Lund,
Here.
Amy Litcher.
Okay, so we have 3 present and we have a quorum. All right, on to the next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. We have one item that within the consent agenda that I would like to pull out separately so that we can then look at that under the action items. That's item I, the revision of the length of the Lake Mills High School Day. So if that could be included within the proposed motion, that would be great. And anything else that you would want to consider.
We just felt like it needed a specific action or motion for that item instead of including it in the overall consent agenda. That's why we'd like to pull that out.
Okay. So,
You can move that the agenda would be.
separated out. Okay, I'll move the item that you mentioned in the consent agenda for the time during the day component be taken out of the consent agenda and acted on separately.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any questions? Okay, then we can have a voice vote for this one. So all in favor say aye.
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 And those who oppose? Okay, motion carries. All right, we are going to move into our board reports, and Mr. Eimers, I will let you share the 3 thank you cards we received.
Sure, we have 3 thank you cards. The first one is from Beth Cordy. She's a 2nd grade teacher for her years of service recognition. Dear Dr. Olson, Megan, and the board of the school district, thank you so much for taking the time to honor me for 30 years of service. Over the last 3 decades, I've had the privilege of touching the hearts and minds of almost 700 children. My goal has always been to get to the heart of each child and to show them that learning is fun, hard work pays off, kindness is key, and that laughter makes everything better. Thank you for the gift of the beautiful wall clock. It is proudly displayed above our fireplace. I am so honored to be part of a district that always has the best interest of children at the forefront of all decisions. And I am thankful for the district's support as I've worked alongside kids for all these years. With gratitude, Beth Cordy. The second thank you note is from Pam Moen. She's a reading teacher in the district for her years of service recognition. To the Lake Mills Area School District School Board, I'd like to thank you for the honor recognition of my 25 years in the Lake Mills School District. I consider myself a lucky person to have lived, raised my family, and worked in this community. As a lifelong learner, I have been blessed to work beside such amazing coworkers that have supported me and taught me so much. Thank you also for the beautiful keepsake mug and pen. Both have been used already. Also, thank you also to Kathy Coleman for always putting together a great food display. With appreciation, Pam Moen. And finally, the third note is from Mark O'Brien. He's a retired sixth grade science teacher from the district, for a memorial for his wife, Julie. During a time like this, we learn how much our friends and family really mean to us. Your expression of sympathy will always be remembered. The family of Julie O'Brien.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, moving on to our administrative reports, and I'm going to invite Ms. Siechlog, our Director of Teaching and Learning, up for our first report.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce Megan Collins and Jessica Noche up here to do the presentation tonight. As we've told you multiple times this year, this duo plus Julia Adame, who is our ML paraeducator, have done so much for our students who are multilingual learners, and we would not have found the success that we have without them. So without further ado, Jessica and Megan.
All right, thanks for inviting me back. So this is our department, like Erin was saying. I'm the coordinator and the ML teacher at the high school and middle school, Jessica Noche. Megan Collins is assigned to the elementary school, and then Julia Adame, this is her second year working as a bilingual paraprofessional in the district. So the first slide I have for you, I've titled Exiting Equals Equity. So when we exit students from the multilingual learner program, it shows that they're proficient in a similar pattern of their peers, their monolingual peers. And the reason this equals equity is because when we put appropriate supports into place, we see systemic equity. And when systemic equity follows, students succeed. So last year in 2022, which was my second year in the district, we exited just 3 students across the entire district. Do I say slide? This year we exited 16. So we exited 2 students at the high school, 10 students at the middle school, and 4 students at the elementary school. This was a direct reflection of the board's approval to hire an additional multilingual learner teacher. Thank you. All right, so what did we see in terms of numbers with our growth? At the high school, last year we saw a 60% overall growth in our access test, and this year 77%. Last year at the middle school, we had a 69% decline in student scores. This year we had an 84% growth.
Wow.
At the elementary school, we had an 81% growth this year and 89% last year. That number has fluctuated. The elementary schools always had really high numbers, so we're not too concerned about that. Another piece of data that was really evident for us was that writing was predominantly the highest domain of growth. I maybe mentioned in my last presentation that the access test runs across 4 days and 4 domains of testing: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. The writing domain, which is typically the hardest one to lift students, also has the highest weight at 30-some%. So when we saw those scores go up, we saw our entire process go up. Slide. So the big takeaways that we had from this data when we were accessing it is that the classrooms that had an ML teacher working in a co-teaching to co-serve model had the most exited students. So for example, Megan Collins worked with Dan Zeski in 4th grade to co-teach, and they exited 4 out of their 6 students. Is that correct, Megan? Yeah. And I worked with Mrs. Mankey, Christina Mankey, in 5th grade at the middle school. we exited the entire population of her class. So, and to her account, I mean, she is also certified ML teacher and a special education teacher, so that was helpful. The other piece of data that we pulled from this was that we noticed that students were dual identified, so both multilingual learners and also special education students were able to exit the program, and we saw that in 5th grade as well. Historically, it's really hard to tease apart which area they need support in and which area affects the other area. So the fact that we saw this really gives us hope that we can push this work forward to continue to help dual identified students exit programming. We also noticed that school goals impact access growth or data, and Chuck will be talking more about that when he's up and presenting. Slide. So what's next? What are we looking forward to for the upcoming year? We went from a content-based model, so that's the programming that we offer our students. We kept it at a content-based model. Historically, that's what we've been. But the DPI has what's called the LEAP crosswalk that signifies all these different types of programmings that benefit students based on their needs. So now that we have more capacity as a program, we're able to offer more diversified programming. So we're going to see something different at all the schools depending on the needs of the students. So it's really exciting. So I'll speak to the high school. We're going to do a continuation of what we call our ESL newcomer program. We have currently 3 non-native speakers or non-English speakers at the high school. They're supported by Julia Dami. She does a wonderful job with these students. In particular, I'd like to speak about one student who came to us who hadn't been in school since kindergarten, and he came to us when he was 17 years old. He's now 19 years old and can do 3rd grade math, and he's starting to read and write in both Spanish and English. So that's really profound. And Julia was a big part of his growth. Additionally, Mirna Ferreiro was a huge part of his growth. She's a Spanish teacher at the high school. She works with the newcomers in a guided study hall and additionally a separate English class that she teaches them. The other way that we were able to support these students is by leveraging the talent that we have in our student base. We have multiple bilingual high school students that we use as TAs to help support in classrooms. Additionally, at the high school, with the non-newcomer multilingual learners, I'll continue with my guided study hall every other day for 90 minutes, and this will be supported in a content-based programming. Lastly, we will continue our substantial professional development. We did a lot last year, especially at the middle school, but within all 3 schools. The upcoming year at the high school, I'll be doing professional development on culturally responsive teaching for MLs. Slide. And then the middle school. So I'll continue to co-plan to co-serve this year with our biggest cluster, which is in the 7th grade. I think the teacher is to be determined. And then we'll also have what's called an integrated ESL program. I can't change the name from ESL to ML because these are DPI languaging or vernacular. But we'll call it the integrated ESL programming. Both myself and Julia will be pushing into all grade levels to help support students. And lastly, at the middle school, we'll have professional development, again, on culturally responsive teaching for MLs, but also on the new WIDA standards. So there are new standards that have been rolled out that align more precisely with the state standards, and the DPI is recommending by 2025 that all schools are giving PD on that to our teachers. So we're getting a really good bump and head start on that, specific around the proficiency language descriptors. I'll let Megan speak to the elementary school process.
Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm so honored to come and talk to you about what has gone on in the elementary school this year, starting what support looked like in our kindergarten. Of course, our kindergartners need more time in the classroom, and so the instructional support was based on student need. So pushing in and supporting those students right directly in the classroom to help with their language acquisition, while also working with 2 newcomers in kindergarten, pulling them out to give them direct language. First grade received very little support, mostly because those students didn't need as much support as other classrooms did. However, I would still go in and provide one-on-one instructional groups for students who did need that. Second grade was a grade level that was in need of most supports. I found myself pushing into daily writing class, reading class, and providing extra reading and writing lessons for our ML students in addition to support in math. Third and fourth grade, where you saw Jessica talk about co-teaching, were my co-teaching grade levels. And co-teaching at the elementary school looks like on a weekly basis, I go and plan with the teacher, and then my supports are offered in writing and reading, and the co-planning and the co-teaching means that we're co-supporting not just our ML students, but our entire students, as some of you might have seen me or experienced that. So I'd like to highlight our fourth grade group. We had such significant growth in fourth grade that out of 22 students in the co-taught classroom, 19 of them showed significant growth. So you can see that the co-teaching model is not just helping our ML students, but it's helping all of the students within that classroom. 86% of those students demonstrated that as well. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for providing me with this opportunity to work with such an amazing population of students and coming and directly working with teachers as well.
All right, slide. So that's it. We just want to say thank you for believing in the vision of the Multilingual Learner Program. Without the support of the board and administrators, Tanya pushing for another teacher, these students would not be getting the support they deserve, and therefore we wouldn't see the growth we're seeing. We likely won't see the same jump forward in growth next year because I feel like we're like back on track where we should be, but we'll continue to see growth. That's natural and normal for supported students. Any questions?
Yes, First, I think it's a terrific program you've built here. I just have to give you all sorts of compliments on it. I was interested in the co-teaching concept, and is that maybe a little more of how that works? Is it a teacher comes in to co-teach once a week, or is it targeted to certain classes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there are 6 different ways you can co-teach in a classroom, and we utilize the way that best supports not only the classroom teacher, but also what the student needs. So one example might be parallel teaching, where 2 teachers are teaching at the same time, or one teacher might be up teaching the mini lesson, the other teacher observes, and then they both pull small groups. Some will have ML students, and some will have ML students and monolingual students. Typically what happens is that there's a co-planning block. So we spend maybe 30 minutes once a week co-planning with that classroom teacher. And then every day during that content block, we go into the classroom and do that co-teaching model. The content block is typically reading or writing. We like to target the area that the student needs. So for example, if there's 5 multilingual learners in a classroom, and 3 of them or 4 of them have a language goal around the reading domain, Megan would maybe choose to co-teach during reading if it fits her schedule. So we look at the need of the students as we look at where we're going to be. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
I was just going to say, your exiting numbers are amazing, and I thank you and your whole team for all that you've done. I was able to see Ms. Collins in action in a couple different grade levels, and like she had said, like the the whole class effect, right? So something that she might be teaching her group of kiddos could truly benefit, the other kids that she might have in that small group or book club, wherever they're reading. And so, not only do her kids feel included in part of this whole thing, but then we have other kids that are benefiting too. So I appreciate all the hard work that you ladies have done with this. Great job.
Thank you. Anything else?
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, our next report, I'll invite our school nurses up to share their report for the year.
Yes, we'd like to, and Mrs. Everson had a family commitment tonight, so she's not able to be here to introduce, but I'd like to introduce our two school nurses, Tony Zastro and Patty Keppel, and they're going to brief you on kind of what they've been working on all year long. So, thank you.
So again, my name is Patty Keppel, and I'm here with Tony Zastro to kind of summarize the Lake Mills School District Nursing Services Report. I've been at the school I've been a school nurse with the district since April of 2022, and Tony has been with the district for the past 26 years, so lots of experience. I'm primarily at the elementary school, and Tony divides her time between the middle school and the high school. We're contracted about 30 hours. We are contracted 30 hours a week each. Tony at this time starts 8 to 2, and I'm 9 to 3 at the elementary school, so we do have our time flexed, so we're there the entire school day if somebody would need anything from 8 to 3. We are both employed by Fort Healthcare and are contracted in the district to provide nursing services. The Fort Healthcare School Nurse Program began in 1995 and currently contracts to 11 area school districts. You can go to the next slide. So those are the districts. And I really like being a part of that team because it's very collaborative. We get to work with a lot of school nurses. I think they say there's like 144 years of experience within that group. So we're able to collaborate and share resources and learn best practices. Next slide. One thing I wanted to touch upon too before I go to this is Jennifer Philbin serves as our medical director for the Lake Mills School District. And the medical director provides orders for emergency treatments, administration of emergency meds, as well as being a resource for us. So the role of the school nurse, school nurses are essential in collaborating with parents and other staff to keep students healthy, safe in school, and ready to learn. Just a few of the roles during the school year that we do, promoting healthy behaviors, medication training to staff, vision and hearing screenings, collecting data and identifying needs, along with doing health room visits during the school day. Next slide. This slide just reviews the Wisconsin Statute 101.02 and also the Administrative Code for Standard G, just saying that each school district needs to provide emergency nursing services and what you need to meet and the following requirements for that. Next slide. This just shows the student presentations that was done this year. We're certainly reaching next year with our goals to include more education, but personal hygiene, many one-on-one discussions with students as they come in the health room or with requests with teachers. We did the human growth and development. That's both for 4th and 5th grade. There's 2 sessions. In the 4th grade, a boys session and a girls session, and then in 5th grade, there's a total. We had 4 groups, 2 girls, 2 boys, and those were done in 2 days, Thursday and a Friday, and there was a 45-minute session each day for each group. So that's basically the presentation that we did with students this year and hoping to do more next year. Next slide. And besides, teaching presentations for classes, we also are doing staff training. You can go to the next slide. This is just some examples of the different medications. And this shows the staff trainings that we did in the different areas for the staff. So basic and oral medication, teaching how to use EpiPens, glucagon. So this is just all based on our health concerns list, the students, and then once we have that health concerns list, then we train the teachers and the staff that will be working with those students so that they are comfortable with working with them and knowing how to use emergency medications. Next slide. This is a kind of a tally of the student health concerns. We have 12% based on what parents' information had given us and doctor's orders and different information that we get when they register. 12% of the enrolled students are reported to have one or more chronic health conditions. So we're looking at the top ones that we see: diabetes, asthma, ADHD, history of seizure disorder, and severe allergies like to peanuts or foods where they would need to have an EpiPen. And it's with these health concerns then that we develop the trainings, develop emergency action plans, health plans, so that we can educate the staff to be able to feel comfortable with these students.
One thing we didn't mention on there is the mental health diagnoses that we have, and it's a very difficult number to capture because there's still a stigma on mental health, and not everybody reports those type of health problems. So we struggled counting them this year. So for that reason, I would say that, Patty, would you agree that mental health is probably our highest number of students that are affected out of all the health problems? So next slide. So this slide is just reporting on our health room visits. You can see elementary school had the most visits. There was a total of 4,874 visits, and that is an increase this year of 730 visits. So what we saw is the middle and the high school both went up about 16 or 17%. We are working on a measure to teach self-care and involve teachers before students come to the health room for this coming year. What we have found for many years, even before fifth grade was at the middle school, is the fifth grade group has the highest number of health room visits. So I met with the fifth grade teachers, and they feel that the coursework is a little harder. They also feel that maybe some avoidance starts happening at that age group. So we're going to work on that this next year. Next slide. So medications have also increased this year by 25%. We had a lot of medications we were giving in the health room. The nurses primarily were giving most of those medications. There are medications that are carried by students. In the high school, they can carry their own over-the-counter medication and non-controlled substances. Students in all grades can carry their own inhaler if the parent and the physician feel that they're capable of using that. So some of the numbers, of course, we can't count because of those self-administered doses. Next slide. This slide's talking about the meetings and the developing of plans that we have been a part of. We have been to many meetings. We develop many plans. Depending on the students that walk into our building at any time of the year, we may be making new plans, meeting with other staff and with the parents for IEPs and 504 plans. We do some billing for Medicaid for nursing services, and that's primarily when we give medications. Next year, we'll be billing on tube feeding and things like that. We have 2 students that will require that next year. And our reimbursement this year for nursing services was a little over $3,200. Next slide. Our immunization audit starts on day 1 of school and goes through the whole school, but we have to send a 40-day report onto the county and the state, and every student that comes in our building has to have immunizations according to the state law or have a waiver on hand. We have 136 waivers total. That's actually down by 11 students from last year. But our students are at 100% for compliance for immunizations. So we appreciate our parents getting the waivers in and getting their students vaccinated as needed. Next slide. Student health screenings, we've done vision and hearing this year, and we do grades 4K through 5 for vision, and 5th grade, oh, did I say 5? I think so. And 7th grade on top of that, and then any staff referrals, we check their vision as well. CAPE and parent volunteers and the Lions Club have helped us do those screenings. Hearing screening is done for grades 5K and 1. You can see the results of those. We have had trouble this year of getting information back from those screenings. The student has to fail their screening at school twice before we send a referral. When the referral goes home, then we wait a month or so and then send a second referral, second notice, and then we start calling parents. But we've had trouble getting a hold of parents this year. Let's see. Next screen. So we're going to work this coming year on communicable diseases. We've only been tracking them, except for COVID, of course, for the last several years. But we've been tracking other communicable diseases at the elementary school primarily. And so what you're seeing here on this slide is elementary school cases of communicable disease. District-wide, we had, with staff and students, 111 cases of COVID this past year. So it's not gone yet, but it's dwindling. Next slide. So our goals from last year, we've met 2 out of 3. Our first goal was to have medical hold team drills using our stock Narcan and have a cardiac event with that. We were able to do that all by the first week in March. And the second one was to develop a process of documentation for, we have a lot of school health visits that are not only staff, but also not only students, but staff as well. So we've developed a documentation tool for that. And the one that we did not meet was those presentations that we said that we just didn't quite get into. So we put that on, next slide, to our goals for next year. Hopefully we can get more presentations in the classroom and for staff. We're talking about doing disease prevention by giving hand washing instruction to students and health promotion, starting with maybe dental hygiene instruction. Our next goal is to coordinate a dental health preventative sealant program. That's hard to say. And we're going to work with Seals on Wheels, which is a free service that, through a grant through the state of Wisconsin, will come in to all of our schools and do a cleaning on one visit with fluoride treatment. And then the second visit, they'll do a sealant. I think they actually come in 3 times. I can't remember what that third time is, but and they don't bill insurance like some of the services that do. And then our last one is we're going to change our medication in service. We did many medication in services, like you saw from those that other slide earlier that Patty was talking about, and it was very labor intensive for the nurses. So we're going to do a big group and do some breakouts and do some group type of training this year. So we want to thank you for the support of the school nurse program, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
I think one of the exciting things that they didn't mention was CISA 2 is a subgrant recipient from the Department of Health Services. So through those grants, which are always very specific on what you can use the funds for, we're sending both of the school nurses to the National School Nurse Conference, which is coming up in about, 2 weeks, right?
The end of June.
So it paid for the expenses for that. So that was an opportunity that usually we don't get to take advantage of.
Once in a lifetime, I think, so we're really excited about it. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
All right, our next administrative report is Ms. Naylor, our Director of Business Services, and she will give you a better explanation of their preliminary budget.
All right, so yes, I have the preliminary budget for the 23-24 school year, and I'd like to stress the word preliminary. As you know, we have a lot of early estimates and early predictions on what might be happening for this next school year. So early in June, we were given word from our School Administrators Alliance and WASB and WASDA that everything was taking a long time. And then on June 8th, we heard that there was a tentative deal made, so it was kind of a 180 very quickly. So part of that tentative deal that Governor Evers made with legislature included K-12 education funding. So we're still waiting on a lot of details and bill language and, an official vote. But some of the things that we know as of right now is that they're talking $325 per pupil increase in the revenue limits in both the 23-24 and the 24-25 school year. So a total of $650 over the biennium. They're also talking about an additional $97 million in special ed reimbursements. And what that means is about 33.3% reimbursement on the prior year expenditures. So the 33.3% is going to vary just depending on how that $97 million is kind of spread apart and allocated. So that could fluctuate anywhere between 32 to 33.3. So just something to keep in mind again with those preliminary numbers. Increase in the low revenue ceiling from $10,000 to $11,000 per student. So if you've been watching anything, probably not as much as I have, but this is a point of, I guess, a little bit of controversy between, there's a total of 28 school districts that this potentially could impact. So there's something called Act 141. In 2017, it was approved. And basically what that is if districts tried for an operational referendum and failed, for the 3 years following that failed referendum, the district's revenue ceiling would freeze at the dollar amount in which that referendum was held. And as you know, we did fail a operational referendum in November. So this could potentially impact us. The difference of $10,000 to $11,000 in that low revenue ceiling per pupil is significant for Lake Mills. There's 28 total school districts, like I said, out of the state that this could impact. It sounds as if 8 of those, well, there's lots of little details that go along with this, but what it really comes down to is that this is still being talked about, and the bill language hasn't been decided upon or voted upon if this is actually going to be held for the upcoming budget. So I'm kind of holding my breath a little bit, hoping for the $11,000. It could be a difference of $850,000 for the school district. So with that being said, I know a lot of people have been asking to contact your legislators and do everything you can, and I know there's a lot of school districts and a lot of us out there. I know Tanya reached out. So we're, letting everybody know our story and how it could impact us because it's significant. So with that being said, I did put for this preliminary budget, I used the $10,000 revenue, low revenue ceiling, just to be cautious, really, and put in the additional $325 per pupil. So for the revenue, again, that includes $742 per FTE, which is a 0 increase over last year, and then the $325 per pupil in the revenue limit. So for the total revenue budget of the general fund, it's about $18.4 million, and then the total revenue for all funds is just about $27.1 million. So again, these reflect estimates of our enrollment and our general aid, the equalized property value. I was conservative with that as well on the recommendation from Baird. And if you remember, Jordan at one of our meetings kind of explained that 2%. So that's the number that I had used for initial prediction for the equalized property values. For the expenditures, I included increases for wages of 4.7, as discussed in previous board meetings. The general fund total expenditure is about 18.5 million, and the total expenditure for all funds is 28.6 million. So the early budget estimates predict a deficit for the 23-24 school year of 1.1 million. And this is due to a number of items, including the ESSER funds being depleted. So that's about $1 million in federal funds that we had in this last budget that we won't have next year. It also, like I said, includes the wages of 4.7 increase, and then obviously overall inflation of fuel, insurance, maintenance, technology, et cetera, et cetera. Everything's going up, as you know. This budget will be on the July board meeting action items. So I will make any revenue adjustments that I may find out between now and then. Again, we went from not everything being on delay to the next day having some tentative numbers. So I'm not sure what will happen and when legislature will come to an agreement. But if I do have some more updated numbers than I do today, I will make those adjustments to the revenues, and then that's what the board will take action on in July. Expenditures shouldn't change unless something major happens, but the expenditures are pretty detailed with wages and benefits and I looked pretty closely at all the different departments, so that shouldn't change. Let's see here. So after I make those adjustments, we approve everything. That is going to be the budget that is going to be noticed in the paper in September, and then the budget that we will take action on at the we will be presented at the annual meeting in September. Again, that's going to be September 25th. September 25th. And then in October, when the revenue limits worksheets are finalized, then the budget will be updated for the school year that had already started. And again, this will result in a modification of the levy. So in October, the levy will be finalized, equalized aid, enrollment numbers, all of our grants, state and federal grants, vouchers, all of that will be finalized in October. And then a reminder that our plan for our debt service and our plan of attack that has been for the last couple of years is to levy appropriately as we can to pre-approve as much debt as possible while keeping that mill rate flat. So that is in this plan as of right now at 4.4 million. That could fluctuate just depending on all the other numbers and how they tie out. So as it stands today, the estimated levy is about 12.5 million with a mill rate of $8.13, again, which will be adjusted in October.
As you can see, Tasha's put an incredible amount of work into that. Spent countless hours here in the past month working on this budget. So thank you, Tasha.
So with that being said, in terms of the current budget this year, in the next couple weeks, I'll be making adjustments to reflect all of our receivables, finalizing all our grant claims, and this includes our maintenance of effort. So maintenance of effort, if you don't know, it's a requirement that school districts have for if they're receiving federal IDEA funds for special ed students. So you have to budget and spend at least the same amount year over year. And so that's something that I'm looking at right now. There's 4 different tests, and I'll spare you the details on those 4 tests. But we have to make sure we meet at least one of those tests that are done by DPI. So right now I'm currently looking at that. So that will also potentially be some adjustments that have to happen. So that's part of kind of tying up the current school year. So those adjustments that may need to happen will be also approved or presented and approved at the July board meeting. Any questions?
Yeah, I was listening to the WASB noon talk, and in there, and I've kind of heard this, that the state is, with these preliminary numbers, the state is saying that that they're getting back to the 2/3, 1/3 kind of concept. But I was a little confused on that, and this is kind of the question, if, and they also said that Governor Evers was more reluctant to do any additional funding on the per pupil versus the revenue limit adjustments. But are those revenue limit adjustments, even for us, if it's 3.25, does the state consider that part of their 2/3? Even though, do you know what I'm saying?
I don't know how to
Because
answer that, actually.
I'm not seeing any dollars coming in new that aren't, and this is where I may not be on the right track. I'm not seeing any new dollars because there was no increase from last year on the per pupil.
So that's the 325. So that's the increase in new dollars. The 325 this year and the 325 next year is new. So depending on where you fall in the low revenue ceiling, that will be added on to your dollar per pupil.
Okay.
So I can, and I'm happy to do this, and it'll probably be better if I had a visual that I could show you the revenue limit worksheet, and I can kind of show you how that works and how it fluctuates things, and I'd be happy to do that if you'd like.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you again for all of your work on this. We'll see you back in July.
Yes.
All right, Dr. Olson, thank you.
All right, we're going to call the principals up, and actually I should say our administrators up one by one to present their school goal updates. And we're going to start with Aaron Siegelog, who will start our process and has been overseeing this whole, the progress of our school goals.
Perfect. So we came to you in February and we did a workshop on goals. And so this is the final accumulation of all the data we've collected and the work that we've done. So I'm going to do just a really quick review. Then we have Steve Considine here for his final board presentation in Lake Mills in lieu of Cale Vogel. Chuck Olson will be here to present on the middle school, Wendy Slom for the elementary school, and then I will come back to wrap it up with our next steps. Slide. You can go to the next one too. So assessment, obviously, Jessica was able to share the fantastic results of our access scores. And as she mentioned, in terms of kids exiting, we won't necessarily see that moving forward. This was getting kids back on track. But the work that they are doing has really led to some of those improved scores. ACT, we received those scores back. We are slightly above the same, slightly above the state average, but that hasn't been a finalized number yet. So that's based on preliminary data. And right now, our scores are looking to be just a smidge higher than they were last year. This was the first year we did the pre-ACT Secure in 9 and 10. They've done the pre-ACT before, but this was in replacing the Aspire test. So we don't have anything to compare it to quite yet. And then forward results were released on Friday. I've started digging into them. I don't have a ton, but to say that our ELA data is higher than our math data. So at the elementary school, I think that really supports that adoption that you guys approved for us. And then the only other piece that is something that we need to work on is we had a very large number of 7th and 8th grade students whose parents opted them out. So for example, at the 8th grade level, 35% of 8th graders did not take the forward, which is going to make our data, when we look at that, you can't really make any kind of generalizations about that group. So we're kind of in conversations about how we can really express the importance to families about the assessment and how we can alleviate some of that stress for students that they feel about it, because it really just provides us with information and helps them to see their growth. In terms of math, we adopted Bridges and Number Corner, so thank you for that. Their professional learning will be in August, and they'll be provided an additional 8 hours to plan the first unit as a team and to organize the materials. I can tell you that I don't think that 8 hours is going to be enough for them to organize it all, but it's our starting point for now. PE and health, most of the curriculum is finished, still waiting on, I think, one high school class. And then they will actually be requesting a course this fall for advanced strength and conditioning. It won't adjust FTE. It'll be similar to the art class that we did this year, where it'll just run during the same time as a strength and conditioning class that's already happening. And then our mentor program, which I'm also in charge of, we had 13 new staff members this year with 11 unique mentors, so we had a couple that had more than one. And we met with them monthly. We went over different, like, what do you need type situations, but also just some general professional learning. Plus, they met with their mentor every month as well. And so that was fantastic in terms of getting to build the relationships among the new teachers, but also to make sure that they're all getting, a really strong start to their career here in Lake Mills. So that's just kind of the review for this year. Any questions about kind of what happened this year, or questions about that stuff?
Yes, just a quick question. The iReady tests, how does that fit into here, or does it?
Yeah, so these assessments are, well, minus the excess, are our accountability measures that get counted towards our report card. iReady is a screener that allows us to adjust our instruction based on how students are performing in the moment. So they do that 3 times a year, and that gives us, it identifies students who might need like a specific group intervention. It might let us know that, our kids really have gotten this, and that's our next unit, so we're gonna make sure that we really push past it. But that's not part of our accountability measures.
Sure, thank you.
I love the mentor program. I think that works well into our strategic pillars of retaining and attracting new teachers, because if they feel successful in their first year and have somebody to go to in years, on, if they need something, that's great. I guess, I know we kind of have talked about this a little bit, but hearing again, as we have some maybe math areas we could look to grow in, if that's something that we needed to consider as we look at budgets for math interventionists and things like that, to provide that extra support for our students, but then also for our teachers as they go through a new curriculum.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Slide. Yeah.
All right, I'm Steve Constein, the assistant principal at the high school. So our first goal, I think it's kind of important to go back to last summer when we created this goal. If you've been in high school goal setting meetings, a lot of times it's all about ACT, math, reading, and writing. I think Dr. Olson and Aaron were in the room with some of our teachers, and it was really teacher-led, and they wanted to make it more personalized, not only for teachers, but students. And so we set the goal by the end of the 22-23 school year, 95% of freshmen will be on track to graduate as measured by successful core class completion. So our subject areas, our core areas, are English, math, science, and social studies, and you can see the total number of Fs in the previous school year, 21-22, and then we broke it down by semester 1 and semester 2. Across the board, we reduced our numbers of Fs, and we did a lot of things. We'll kind of talk about some of the strategies that we used and the success we had, but you can see we didn't quite get to our 95%. We were just a smidge under it, but we were really proud, and our teachers were really excited about that. Next slide. So some of the strategies that we used that made us really successful this year, we had monthly grade level meetings. Our focus area was our freshman class, but we had our teachers set up for the sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So each of the grade levels were doing the same type of work. We learned a lot about our students. I wish everybody could kind of sit in on those meetings. The teachers had conversations that they said they've never had before. A lot of times you only see what's going on in the 4 walls of your classroom, but you really got to discuss the whole student. We learned a lot about what was going outside of the classroom and the school with them, so that was really great. Our advisory, we put students with an advisory teacher to build relationships. They follow that teacher for 4 years. Something new this year is we had advisory grade checks. So the advisory teacher actually went and talked about the grades on a one-on-one setting. We've never done that before, and it was actually a good relationship builder. We had our counselors and we had some really great teachers really lead the charge and lead these meetings, and that was really awesome to see. We were able to target instruction for certain students, and something that we really saw from the teachers was a real sense of urgency. They understood what our goal was this year, especially with this incoming group of freshmen, and how we wanted to try to do our best to reduce the failing grades. And so we talk about it, but it was right there in front of them. So we saw a greater sense of urgency. And then we really saw increased relationship building between teachers and students. What's working in other classes, you know, if a student's struggling in this class but doing really well in this, those teachers started having conversations amongst themselves, which was really cool to see. Next slide. So some of the stuff that impacted the data, our progress reports, our teachers do accept late work, and sometimes we would run our progress reports, our DF list, when our teachers in our monthly meetings, and sometimes there might be grades that weren't quite up to date, so we're going to try to streamline that a little bit better. We really found out that relationships were really important, and you can kind of see one of the bullet points we said, if there's no relationship, we can have the best teacher in the world doing the best lesson in the world, but the kid won't care. The student won't care. And so we found ways with our teachers working together to help build relationships that maybe wouldn't have been there before. And one of the main things that our teachers really brought up in a lot of meetings was the grades are not the overall picture of our students. There's a direct correlation with the mental health needs of our students and also attendance. The more school they missed, the lower the grades were, and it was a lot harder to catch them up. So attendance was one of the major factors that were like, how can we get more students in school and identify when they need to be in school? Next slide. So kind of where are we going to go with this for next year? I think the most important thing is teachers came to administration this year and said, we want to continue doing this. This was a good goal. We learned a lot. They even talked about, some groups of teachers talked about following their class because they felt like they made really good relationships with those students. This summer, we're going to create a watch list. We're going to try to be proactive with our students instead of reactive. We kind of know our students that are coming in next year that we need to get on track right away. So our teachers want to have those meetings before we even get into the school year. And our advisory class lists are going to be distributed to all teachers. We've kind of kept advisories, I'd say, in a silo. We want you just to focus on your class. They're not allowed to be pulled out to other teachers, that sort of thing, unless it's clubs or activities. Now we're going to release the class list for advisories to all the advisory teachers. So if a student is struggling in math, they could call the social studies teacher that has the advisory, or that has the student advisory, and say, we'd really like this student to come to our class and get some missing work done. So we're pretty excited about that. And then our ninth graders, we're going to create tickets next year where they can't sign out of study hall. It's very popular for them to go to the library, go someplace else, right? But they're going to have to get a ticket, and when that ticket shows that they're passing all their classes or they're going to work with a teacher. So next slide. Our second goal was by the end of the 22-23 school year, 90% of the student body will have an adult in the district that they feel connected to or feel they can talk to, as measured by the student social and emotional learning survey. So we do this SEL survey about a month into school, right after homecoming. I think homecoming is really important in the high school to really feel them connected to the community. So we do this in the fall, winter, and the spring. We did not reach 90%. However, we are really proud of our data. You can see that from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, every grade level went up in their percentages that felt that they had an adult in the district. So we do weekly SEL lessons in our advisories during Tuesdays. So our students and it's a plan on that. They cannot check out of advisories during that time. And one of the things that we really found was at the high school, we offer over 50 extracurricular activities. And we found that when we were kind of running the names and numbers, the more activities they were in, the more connection they had to adults. So that's something at the beginning of the year next year, we're really going to push our students to get involved with something outside of the classroom because we think that really helps our relationships. I think that's it for me. If you have questions.
Thanks, Steve. I just had a couple.
Yeah.
The advisory concept you had, could you explain that again? I wasn't quite sure how that worked.
Yeah, so we place students in small groups. Each teacher has one. It's right after first block, students go and get their breakfast, and then they go to a 30-minute, in some places they call them homerooms, stuff like that. But it's usually a group of about 15 students maximum. all in the same grade level, and they're with that teacher for 4 years. So they will have that same advisory teacher their sophomore, junior, and senior year. Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, we allow clubs and activities to have meetings. So there's a lot of groups that come in, and if you come to the PAW, our school store is open. If you come on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday between 9:30 and 10, you'll see a lot of people in the hallway because kids are going to different places. Tuesdays and Thursdays we call home-based. You can't check out of your classroom, your advisory, you have to stay there. And that's what, on Tuesdays we do those SEL lessons, and we feel that's really important for the teachers to build relationships during those Tuesdays and Thursdays because you can't leave the classroom. And we're trying to create a buddy system, kind of. This is their group, and it's been really successful with freshmen. And then you get to the senior year, they've had kind of that's the one class they had in 4 years that never changes. Same teacher, same group of students, so it's been successful.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that.
I was going to ask, I mean, the relationship piece is huge, you're right. And so I had wondered if you'd ever come across with the advisory groups, if perhaps maybe a student didn't necessarily fit or mesh well with that group or that teacher, and you were able to get them a different group or teacher that they could be with, because 4 years in a group that doesn't necessarily work isn't going to be helpful for them.
I wouldn't say regularly, but we know when relationships aren't meshing, or maybe personalities aren't meshing. So one of the things, students will try to maneuver sometimes to be with their friends, but a lot of times what we ask, who's a teacher that you connect with? And so our advisors are set up by grade level, so they know, if you're a sophomore and maybe it's just not working out with the teacher, we'll say, okay, here's the sophomore advisory teachers. Is there one of them that you have a relationship or connection with? And we do move them. So it's not something that happens a lot, but it does need to happen sometimes.
Well, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm presenting on our middle school goals. So the first of our two middle school goals was really directly tied to with what Jessica shared earlier. So the goal was that we'd have 60% of the ML student population in grades 5th through 8 improve on their reading and writing can-dos. And this goal we really did kind of crush. We did a great job. Our staff did a great job. Jessica and her team supported us through all of that. But ultimately, kind of what she reported out, we had 80+% of our student ML population grow with 10 students exiting the program, which again was ultimately the goal of those can-do statements, was to show growth on the access score. So the can-dos and the access, it was our measure for being able to get to growth in the access score. As she kind of mentioned, the things that worked were that co-teaching and co-serve model, particularly in 5th grade. We also had a set of teachers participating in Project Respect, which is through the UW, but also is a focused on equity amongst our ML students. And so we had teachers beyond the students that were in a co-teaching environment participating in that. And I think it helped raise awareness of how do we support students that are ML students. And then one of the things that Jessica kind of mentioned, but really I think for us was super valuable and helpful, was the fact that they provided PD for our staff. Jessica put together a bunch of videos throughout the year, presented in person several times, but the PD was really around strategies that help support ML students, and she did 6 different strategies throughout the course of the year. What I would say about that is that those strategies were awesome for ML students, but really they're impactful for every single kid that you could use them with. There was things like sentence stems. So for students who are struggling to write a sentence, giving them that framework to build that sentence, right? And taking some of that work out so they could really focus on the hard work of putting the important pieces of that sentence together and not the starting words or, those connecting words. And she gave, that was just one example, but those were super helpful because, again, I think they impacted not only our ML students, but far beyond that. They reached far beyond that group. I think one of the things that we are continuing to focus on is just targeting that group of students, and we're looking at how do we schedule classes, when we can cluster students together in certain classes for that support to be able to come into those classes and make sure that they're able to get their needs met within that environment. So a lot of that comes from the scheduling lens for us. As implications for the 23-24 year, I think there's been mentioned a couple of times, but we don't expect quite the same growth, just because it was pretty significant this year, just and getting us back to where we really wanted to be. But we do expect our students to grow, and I think continuing what I'm excited about is continuing to grow all of our staff, regardless of if they have a cluster of ML students in their classroom at any given time in the day, really growing their strategies and their bag of tricks so that when those students or any student does come to them that has a significant need, they know how to make sure that student's getting their needs met. So that's and again, that will come from that co-teaching and co-serving. In my experiences in the past, when you have that co-teaching and really co-planning around that just builds the teacher's ability, all teachers' abilities, but then the next time they encounter a similar student or a student with similar needs, they have a way of making sure they can meet those needs, and they might not need quite the same level of support from like Jessica and her team, but they still will be able to support those students without that same level of support. Next slide, please. So goal 2. Goal 2 is Goal 2 is a little bit harder for us. If you can look through the data, ultimately. Our goal was to have 70% of our male students meet their typical growth and 40% of our male students meet their stretch growth on the iReady assessment. And so if you look at in that spring category, you see that we certainly, if you go down to the very bottom, that's all of our male students combined. And we were at 53% meeting their typical growth and 62% meeting their stretch growth when you compared from fall to spring. In a couple of grades, we did meet that 70% in the typical growth in 7th and 8th grade in particular. 6th grade was an area where we see, obviously, there's some need for growth there. So that will be our incoming 7th grade students. And then our 5th grade was not quite where we wanted to, but did make some growth along the way. I think the thing that I struggled with and our staff struggled with, there's a little bit of heartbreak, honestly, from our staff in this one, because many of our staff's SLOs or student learning objectives was built around this goal. And so we had a pretty all-in focus on this. And I have one of the things that I looked at, and when I met with teachers at the end of the year to talk through their SLOs and the results, one of the things that I kept hearing over and over again is I started and I got to winter and I looked at our scores, and you can kind of see if you look at this that the winter to spring, you don't see a lot of difference there. And that's where our staff got to winter and they saw their students were progressing often faster than they might have expected, and they were doing really well and they were really excited. And so that mid-year SLO looked really great. We didn't have a lot of revisions to it. And then they got to the end of the year, and what they often reported out and what I looked at when I saw the data was that students who had met their growth in winter then sort of, as far as the test is concerned, regressed in that spring assessment and didn't meet their growth. So they ultimately had a specific example. I can give you one. I had a teacher share with me that she had 8 of her 15 students meet their growth in their typical growth in winter. And so she was like, we're right on track. That put her at 53%. She was like feeling like, okay, I just keep doing what I'm doing. And then in the spring, she had only 5 of the 15 male students in her class meet that growth. And actually 5 of the 10 that didn't meet it, 5 had met it in the winter. When I looked at that data altogether and kind of looked at if we looked at a student that met their growth or male students that met their growth at any point in time, whether it was winter or spring, we would have been at about 65% of our students meeting their typical growth and about 35% of our students meeting their stretch growth. So that is what it is, right? The data is the data. So, but it did lead to us kind of raising some questions and some things for us to think about moving forward. And I think one of those questions is, what is the data over the course of the year? Like, how do we want to look at that data and how do we use that data? Because I can't remember who mentioned it earlier on, when we think, it was Aaron, when you had asked about the iReady data, Ken, and what our teachers are kind of trained to do is they look at that data and they use that data to then plan for what's coming. But if that data then tells them a story that maybe isn't an accurate story, or at least didn't seem to be accurate in the spring, again, they felt a little bit heartbroken, right? They've maybe shifted some focus to a different set of students, or that set of students that hadn't reached their typical growth, and then all of a sudden those students that had met it didn't meet it again. So for us, it raised some questions about a couple of things. I think one is what information, how do we use that information? Do we want to make sure it's usable information for us? And then I think the other question is, is that a function of a spring assessment, and is it something that we need to refocus how we approach that? So do we reach out and reassess students potentially if they didn't meet, if they had met their growth, and then all of a sudden, they were at a 5th grade level and then they showed up at a 3rd grade level? I don't believe, and none of our teachers believed in my conversations, that they actually regressed, right? That they lost 2 years of growth from winter to spring. We know they continued to grow, and it showed in their classroom assessments, all of those things. So we wondered, is it something associated with the end of the year and testing at the end of the year? And so we're going to look at, when we see that, what do we do? How do we respond to that? As a classroom teacher, do we have them reassess, communicate with families? Hey, we know your student was here. They showed up here at the end of the year. We'd really like to see if that was an accurate representation on that day. We know a test happens in one day, or often about one day, and it's a snapshot in time, right? And so maybe that snapshot in time wasn't the accurate reflection of those students. And then how do we just make sure that, continue to make sure that families are aware? So we talked about trying to make sure that our iReady assessment and seeing that growth over the year, we know that we share those results with families, but sometimes making sure that they, if you get something brought home by a child that's a piece of paper, remembering what it was and what had happened the previous assessment and the assessment before that, so that they kind of have a clear picture of what's happening. So ultimately, as far as the work that went into this goal, we felt like I felt like we did a really good job of growing our understanding of what male readers needed as far as how to engage, and a lot of it was around engagement. Truly, the research really points to engaging male readers, finding books that they're interested in, finding opportunities for them to see other adults reading. And so we made some adjustments in our programming around those things. I think so, and I think our team felt like they learned quite a bit through that process. Our teachers felt like they learned quite a bit through that process. Now I think for us, it's how do we incorporate that and use that and continue to look at making sure our what we're seeing in the classroom from our assessment standpoint matches what we're seeing on that iReady assessment, because we really did feel like we saw some significant growth amongst our students. Questions? There's a lot of words.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a very good presentation.
Thanks.
It appears to me that, just from my own, that you've done really well at the growth, addressing the growth you've identified, but it does seem like sustaining it is also just as challenging. Is that a fair statement? In other words, you have growth, but then to keep kids at that level, or?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's true, but I also think that one of the things, I have to dig into this. So I'm speaking a little without probably evidence to back this up from our students at least. But when I did, as Aaron mentioned, we got our forward results, or some of our forward results, not individual student results, but some aggregate data. And for example, our 6th grade students are one of our highest scoring grade levels in reading on our forward data as far as I've looked. It's been a preliminary look at this point. But I think about that and I look at growth and achievement, and that is there a correlation between those two things? I do kind of wonder that. Maybe, they're a high achieving group. So is growth something that is lagging because of that? I don't know. So I think that we do see a bit of that sustaining growth is hard.
Well, thank you. I will say, though, that it's really impressive to see the depth that you go to
Thanks.
get these.
Well, our team, again, our staff was really, they were an invested group in this goal. So we were hoping for different results, and I think we had different results. I don't think our assessment showed that, or our performance on our assessment showed that, I should say.
So I don't remember what WASB conference it was, but we had talked about or heard about, learned about people like presenting their data. And sometimes that can be challenging because that's your hard work, right? And so I hope that they're not embarrassed in the same sense because you have done a lot of work. And one of the things that they also said, one of the main presenters was, it's important to fail, right? It's your first attempt in learning. And so I think what you did with that and taking the things that you learned and how can we tweak it and what can we do to make it better is exactly the right thing. So I know that they're feeling heartbroken by this, but they have done a lot of good work, and what you're now seeing and doing with that is just counts for the amazing people that you are.
Thanks. Yeah, our staff did an awesome job, and they'll continue to. The thing I appreciated is all of them looked at is how, like you said, how do we grow from this, right? How do we look at it and say, okay, maybe we have to tweak some things, but we know the work we're doing is the right work, and we're seeing that in maybe different areas, but we're still seeing it. So.
I would say the data that you can't put down on paper, I mean, there's just a remarkable difference between the middle school last year and the middle school to this year, just the feel of the building, the culture when you walk in. And I mean, I think this is pretty tremendous for Chuck's first year in a building, getting to know staff and students, and then still seeing the growth in the students. So I'm looking forward to year 2, 3, and 4 of what he's going to be able to accomplish now getting this first year under your belt. So
thanks. I'm excited.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good day, guys.
Hello. All right. Elementary school. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the data for our literacy goal that we created back in August around phonemic awareness. 80% of our students demonstrating at or above grade level proficiency in phonemic awareness. And you see our initial fall, our winter, and then our spring. And overall, as a school, we definitely did a great job with this one with 94% as a school. Now, that being said, things look a little different depending on the grade level. In the early grade levels, in our 4K K1, we're really working on phonemic awareness with Heggerty, and then as the students get older, it's based on need. So students that don't have that, those letter sound connections yet, the teachers are working in small groups and individually to get those students what they need. And then the next phase is phonics. I did hear a lot of anecdotal information as well, especially like kindergarten teachers, seeing how students were connecting this already with their writing and seeing such improved writing than they had had before, and people are really excited about it. And so that's been really exciting. Next slide, please. So some of the work that we did, implementing Heggerty phonemic awareness curriculum to Fidelity, and that was doing professional learning with our literacy coach, Michelle Cook, and ongoing work. And again, that was 4K through first grade, and then in small groups in the other grade levels as needed. And teachers were really working very intentionally, doing continual little checks with students and giving real purpose what they needed. And that's both in the classroom and then also in interventions and things like that. There was a lot of success, like colleagues just celebrating because they were seeing the difference that this curriculum was making with students, so that was exciting. So we're definitely planning to move forward with continuing our Heggerty instruction for next year and really working on now the next phase as the students get older. How can we build upon our phonics instruction and connecting now students having that stronger foundational base and building upon that and looking at that. Some of the data that I did pull out looking at students who qualified for free and reduced lunch just overall in our literacy goal. So looking at our iReady screener, there is a large discrepancy between our students who are qualifying for free and reduced lunch compared to our students who are able to pay for lunch. The largest discrepancy was with our third grade students, for example, with 53% of our students who qualify for free and reduced lunch were at or above proficiency overall in literacy, compared to 82% of our students who qualify for paid lunch. So while this is a celebration, I'm excited to dig into kind of the next level of work and really looking at our students who have IEPs who aren't performing at the same level as their peers, as well as our students who are living in poverty who are not performing. But overall, we had a success here with our phonemic awareness goal. Next slide, please. This was our math goal, which our goal was for 80% of our students to be proficient. Overall, school-wide, we achieved 70% proficiency. Now, that is a growth compared to last year at the end of the year. We had 63% as a school, and the year before it was 62%. So this year it was 70% as a school. You can see the data here, and that is how many students were proficient in each grade level. And I know we've talked quite a bit, and Erin has talked as well, looking forward to our new curriculum and the things that are ahead with math. Next slide, please. So some of the things that I think helped us in math, teachers working in small groups, they were doing some pre-teaching for upcoming concepts, and I know you've heard a lot about co-planning and co-teaching tonight. There was a lot of success with both our special education teachers, our ML teachers, our literacy coach going in and often doing a little pre-teaching with students who would benefit from that, and then reteaching as needed. Again, piloting both Eureka and Bridges math curriculums, which our teachers found to be superior to our existing curriculum. And some teachers really took advantage of the AVMR training we had last summer and continued and used that as an assessment and continued working. Others, it didn't build as much traction, but for some students that was a help. But we did have inconsistencies with teachers trying to supplement our existing curriculum. So that was just a continual challenge we had this year that, again, we're looking forward to next year with our new curriculum that we're excited about, and how we're going to meet the needs of all of our students. We just had a preliminary training for administrators last week, and I'm already excited about everything that it has to offer. Again, also looking at the disaggregated data in math, I was seeing very similarities to what I just mentioned in literacy with our students qualifying for free and reduced lunch, not achieving at the same level as their peers. And so we're really, Erin and I were talking, and I was talking with Tanya too, just how can we tackle that from high expectations for all students to building background knowledge and really focusing on number sense with our youngest kids, and how can we really try to work on that piece as well. So we're overall happy with our data, but yet we're just really ready to dig in and go to the next phase. Any questions for me?
Thank you for all of your work.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is sorry.
Someone else, Chuck, did you throw a pen earlier? Oh, maybe it was just up here. Someone's stealing it. All right, I'll go fast though, because I know you want to move on to your next thing. So someone asked me about a month ago if I was ready for the end of the school year and all of that, and I said, well, I'm already living in next school year. And so I have been working quite a while on ensuring that we have things set up already for next school year. So professional development-wise, 4K5 will be doing Bridges implementation, and that'll take place 2 days in August, and then continually throughout the year. On professional learning days, we will also have Stephen Mialovich from CISA 2 in to provide coaching sessions. So he will observe, and then he will meet and debrief and provide strategies to teachers. The goal is that he will meet with each teacher twice by winter break. Additionally, as Wendy mentioned, the administrators attended leading your Bridges implementation training. And so we will also have a consistent walkthrough form so that if we're visiting a classroom, we can be providing consistent feedback as well. We will also have a literacy consultant in next year to assist with coaching our teachers on intentional planning and intentional instructional delivery. So making sure that what we really want kids to learn is the focus of the lesson, and that we're really clear and explicit with kids. We're also doing the CESA 6 Early Literacy Academy. So we have a group of teachers that are going to go to that. That is, I think, 6 or 8 sessions throughout the school year. And we're doing supporting struggling secondary readers through CESA 6. So I have general education, special education, and administration, plus our literacy coach who will be going and attending trainings about what does it look like to support students who are struggling to read at the older grades? Because as our data has shown, we still have kids struggling even when they're older. So how are we responding to that? In terms of the professional learning, we will have the majority of staff going through their curriculum, identifying what is essential to teach and to cover, aligning that, and really looking into the assessment piece. And are we really assessing what we are wanting kids to learn? We also have the normal curriculum review cycle happening. So ELA, Tech Ed, and FACS will be going through their self-study year. A lot of that is actually what they're doing on professional learning, but they'll also receive additional professional learning. PALS is being replaced. It's no longer existing, so we are going to be updating that. We'll do Hegarty plus a district assessment for letter sounds. The ACT will be completed online this coming year, which is a different step. Our students have been taking all of their other standardized tests online. This is actually the last remaining paper assessment. And so given that students with the pre-ACT Secure, the Forward exam, they actually have more test experience on the computer than they do on paper. And you might not think that's a big idea, except for we have kids who don't know how to fill out bubble sheets sometimes, because it's just not something that they do. And I already mentioned the plan for addressing parent opt-outs. More support is coming for our new teachers. We have 3 staff members, Brad Smith, Kelly Hagstrom, and Katie Hoffman, who are going to be receiving specialized professional learning around coaching new teachers. And they will be a second mentor for a new teacher. They're going to be specifically there for instructional coaching. This will be in addition to their normal contracts, and we're still kind of working out what that looks like, but they are all very excited to kind of take on that leadership role. The only other thing that I wanted to mention was that for the administrative team, we're also doing our professional learning. We'll be going to the PLC at Work conference in July, and that directly relates to all this work, which is really ensuring that we have high expectations for all and that every child has the opportunity to succeed. And so I know that that's kind of our jumping off point, and we are excited about it. Now I'm done and you can move on.
Thank you. That was very important. I'm glad you stepped on what I was saying.
Yeah, I'd like to thank administration and all the leadership. It's just tremendous, the work that's going on.
I was just going to say, I mean, you can see you just had our whole admin team showcase the talent and the work that they've been working on all year. And I mean, we've just got the best of the best here in Lake Mills as far as leaders.
Well, and you can
Really
see the
great.
growth across the grade level, like the vision across the district is unified, which is helpful for kids and teachers alike. So it's awesome. Okay, well, thank you. Then moving on is our community input, but I don't think that we have anyone, so we will continue on to the next thing, which is our consent agenda. This month's consent agenda is going to include the approval of the following: the May 15th regular meeting minutes, June 5th Facilities and Finance Personnel Committee proceedings, May's Treasurer's Report and Vouchers and Invoices, the Personnel Report, FFA Land Use Agreement, the WIAA Membership Contract, and then like we stated earlier, we'll take that last one into the action items. So I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Ken Imers,
Aye.
Kirk Lund,
Aye.
Brianna Beslick.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, moving into the action items. If it's okay, we'll do the item I, if you want to go back to the consent agenda part, which is the revision of length of the Lake Mills High School Day. And like I said, it's in the consent agenda, item number I. Dr. Olson, do you want to give a little explanation there?
Yeah, and that was just a lack of oversight in our, when we added the 10 minutes to the high school day, our motion was so specific that it didn't allow for a lot of flexibility, so the motion and approval was to add the 10 minutes onto the end of the day. We thought we could get the bus schedules to run, but we weren't, it would have created a gap. I thought we were going to be able to bring buses back to the high school, but clearly with the traffic that's on 89 at the end of the day especially, we need to start the buses at the end of the day at the high school. So therefore, we worked with Mr. Vogel, and we'll add 5 minutes on to the beginning of the day and 5 minutes on to the end. So just, I do have a motion written in there, so that's why we just needed to amend that approval to allow us to do that.
All right, if there aren't any questions or discussion, I'll entertain a motion listed under consent agenda, item I.
I move to approve adding 10 additional minutes to the high school day with the start and end times of the school day set at the discretion of the administration.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any other additional questions or discussion? All right, then I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Kirk Lund,
Aye.
Ken Imers,
Aye.
Brianna Beslick.
Aye, motion carries. Our next action item is for the non-renewal of the JEDI contract. And this is something that will continue JEDI through the 2023-24 school year and then migrate into the Wisconsin Virtual School, which does not charge a fee to participate in some of the other similar course fees that JEDI does.
Well said.
Yes, I had a question. I think it's great we're able to move onto a system that doesn't cost anything, right? But I'm just wondering how they can do that.
There's still costs for each individual class. They just aren't charging an overall consortium fee. So with JEDI, we pay the $4,250, I believe, yes, $4,250, whether we use classes or not from them. And then there's a fee structure for all the additional add-ons. So the Wisconsin Virtual School is part of one of the CISAs, so they've already got the administrative costs taken care of. And so when we met with them, the classes are comparable, but the students will continue with JEDI for next school year, as Brianna said.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move the Lake Mills Area School District withdraw from the JEDI Consortium.
I'll second the motion.
All right, moved and seconded. And if there's no other questions or discussion, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Ken Imers,
Aye.
Kirk Lund,
Aye.
Brianna Beslick.
Aye. Motion carries. Our next action item is regards to our food service personnel rates. And Ms. Naylor, I'll let you explain a little bit better. I know you're kind of an expert in this area as it comes from a different fund. So if you just want to give us some history, I know we've talked about it at our previous finance personnel meeting, just to recap for everyone listening.
You bet. So, yes, so food service comes out of a separate fund from our general fund, which is Fund 10. So food service is Fund 50. And all the accounting is completely separate. Recently, Lake Mills was notified by DPI that we have an excess cash balance. So we had to come up with a corrective action plan. And according to DPI, an excess cash balance means that we have in excess of a 3-month average of our operating expenditures. So the calculations work out that we have almost $400,000 in excess cash in food service. So we had put together, myself and Kathy Coleman, our Director of Food Service, got our heads together and we put together kind of a plan that we submitted to DPI, which has been approved for the spend down of those funds. Part of that was an increase in the hourly wages of our food service hourly personnel. We identified actually a couple of years ago probably that they were under market significantly. So this was a really great way to be able to bring them up to at least market and be competitive with our surrounding school districts. So with that being said, that is part of our part of our approved plan is to increase those hourly rates. And in addition to that, new tables and chairs for the high school, some equipment, eventually a grease trap replacement at the high school. That's a larger project that will be over the course of a couple of years, pending many other things that are kind of in the works. And so we don't want to jump the gun too much on that project, but that's part of the potential plan for the $400,000. So with that being said, the wage proposal is attached, but it basically brings that entry-level cook 2 position, so that part-time position, up to a starting rate of $16 an hour, and then so on and so forth as the steps go. 20% increase as the years go on, including the annual increases that happen from that point on. Any questions?
Well, I think like we heard in our thank you earlier today, our food service group does an amazing job with everything they do. I mean, the things that they cater out for us, and so we are glad that we can potentially bring them back up to market and appreciate the things that they do.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion if there aren't any other questions.
I move the board approve the food service hourly wage schedule for the 2023-24 school year as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. If there aren't any other questions and discussions, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Kirk Lund,
Aye.
Ken Imers,
Aye.
Brianna Beslick.
Aye, motion carries. Our next action item is, last month we had recognized Mr. Simden with his retirement, so we wish him the best as he moves on with that. But this approval would be for the new hire for buildings and grounds.
Yes, actually, I could let you speak on. We're excited to have Nick Beslick join our team. He comes to us with a wealth of leadership experience, having prior experience not only running his own business, but other construction-related experience in the private sector. So also being a dad to 3 of the students in our district. He's very invested in the success of the district, as well as been a volunteer coach for us in the rec department. So we feel confident in his abilities. We're asking Brianna to abstain from this vote, and because this is not a contracted position, we are still okay with just the 2 of you and not having a majority of the full board.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion?
No.
All right, then I will entertain a motion.
I move the board approve Mr. Nicholas Beslick for the position of Director of Building and Grounds.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. If there aren't any other questions or discussion, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Ken Imers,
Aye.
Kirk Lund,
Aye.
Brianna Beslick.
Abstain? All right, motion carries. Okay, next action item. We are going to bid Mr. Zerniak a farewell. He's our current Director of Technology, so we wish him the best of luck in his next endeavor, but this position will be for the new hire of our new Director of Technology, Mr. Stayer.
Yeah, and Mr. Sayre is coming from our neighboring district here in Waterloo. So I guess I'll call him second in command for the technology department for Waterloo. Has prior experience working for Epic. So again, some private sector experience that I think will help us as well. Has many talents, a strength in actually AV type of technology. Is a volunteer coach and also a licensed bus driver. So kind of a jack of all trades. So we feel fortunate to be able to offer him this position.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move the board approve Mr. Luke Stayer for the position of Director of Technology.
I'll second the motion.
All right, moved and seconded. If there isn't any other question or discussion, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Kirk Lund,
Aye.
Ken Imers,
Aye.
Brianna Beslick.
Aye, and motion carries. Our final action item tonight is the approval of our gifts, and we continue to be grateful for all of the support the community provides us.
So I'll move the board thank the generous donors for the continued support of the students and programs of the Lake Mills School District. These are the gifts: the use of a 5-acre plot of land for the FFA from Roger and Beth Wiedenfeld, and the following donations to the school's food pantry for students, the Mill. $618 from the Moravian Church, $1,000 from Culvers of Lake Mills, and $1,000 from Greenwoods State Bank.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any other questions or discussion?
Well, I'd just like to thank these people again for these gifts. And again, I know we've said this in the past, but the 5-acre plot is very unique, I think, to our district, and is a terrific thing.
I agree. All right, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Ken Imers,
Aye.
Kirk Lund,
Aye.
Brianna Beslick.
Aye, motion carries. All right, our next agenda items, Dr. Olson.
Yes, I'll be bringing you some employee handbook revisions. They're just some minor things. Tash will be bringing along some of the budget adjustments. We'll do the final vote on that, and then a July 1st equalized aid estimate. Dom is going to be here to provide a summer school update, and I think he will be bringing some students along to help him with that. And then Chief Schroeder and Officer Johnson will be here to provide the SRO report.
I'd like to add one thing. Tomorrow night, I'm going to my first CESA, is it pronounced?
CISA?
CESA, meeting at Whitewater, so I can just give a brief.
Yes, that would be great.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And our final thing, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those oppose? All right, motion carries. We are adjourned. Good night.
Thank you.